ADHD shows up as one of these three. So they used to be called subtypes, and now they're called presentations because we recognize that it can shift depending on the context. So primarily inattentive presentation, primarily hyperactive / impulsive presentation, and combined presentation. Hyperactive impulsive is the stereotypical ADHD that would be most easily recognized, but is actually least common in the sense that it excludes most girls. Most girls are going to show up on the right side of that with inattentive presentation of ADHD. And maybe behind closed doors or with their friends, the hyperactivity, impulsivity shows up. But because mostly boys are hyperactive and impulsive, there's a huge segment of the population that's being ignored who may actually be having difficulties. And going back to one of those myths of ADHD that it's somehow related to struggling in school, that definitely can be the case. But I know many people with incredibly high GPAs and strong academic records who have ADHD. And I was in graduate school when I was diagnosed, and people are like, what? How can you be in graduate school if you got ADHD? It's like, well, you should see the path that got me here. It's very crooked, and everything was done at the last possible second. It was done in a very ADHD way. Or in the case of my oldest daughter, she got straight A's all the way through school and into university, but at a great cost to her peace of mind. 2 hours of homework takes 4 hours of homework, and you're not really sure where the other 2 hours really went. I was working on it the whole time. It's like, well, apparently not, because it doesn't take that amount of time. And if I was tracking her with a camera, I would be able to edit out all the times she wasn't working, lost in thought, chewing on something, getting a snack. Oh, who was that texted me? We would recognize, yeah, there's lots of times they actually weren't focused. Having said that, she still got the results, but it reminds me of when she was actually in kindergarten or grade 1, and I said to her, she said, school's not doing so good. And I said, what do you mean? Your report card, like everything is like exceeding. And she said, well, yeah, Dad, that says how I'm doing, not how I'm feeling. And I was like, oh, okay, that's true. Lesson learned. I wish I'd really internalized that, because all the way through, all we saw was her success and not the pain that went into getting that success. Also, ironically, I think as she got older, she made some good friends who weren't from Abbotsford, where we live. They were from Maple Ridge and Langley and different areas, Mission. And this group of girls, they all had very similar type personalities. They were high achievers with anxiety and some perfectionism and this kind of stuff. And I think the story goes that one of them was, when they were sitting around, mentioned something about her Adderall or something like that, just ADHD medication. And another one said, oh, wait, you're on Adderall? I'm on Adderall. And turns out all of them were. They all had ADHD and didn't know that about each other, and had sort of found each other and had this very similar profile, which again is another thing that I think works for and against us when it comes to screening for ADHD, is chances are, if you have ADHD, so do some of your friends and some of your family, and it can normalize what we see. And because it normalizes what we see, we don't see it. When I was first diagnosed myself as an adult and went to my mom and said, hey, this is a thing that explains my whole life, the answer was predictably, what? Everyone's like that. It's like, no, not everyone's like that. Just everyone in our family and our friends. Because who else would be friends with us? We like blowing stuff up, and we live in the suburbs. It's like not a good match. That's who our friends were. If you can't come to the Levitt house and endure something blowing up or being lit on fire, then you're not going to come back, right? And it took me only till a few years ago that I realized, wait, everywhere we lived, we had grumpy neighbors. I wonder why. What's the common denominator here? Either we have really bad luck picking houses, or we make the neighbors grumpy. That was probably the more likely answer.